Good afternoon. The day was November 11th, 1918, exactly 100 years ago today, that the guns of World War I fell silent on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, marking the end of hostilities. Each year on that date, we pause to honor our veterans for their service to our nation. My name is Mo Fredette, a member of American Legion Hayes Village Post 96, your host for today's program, and on behalf of all veterans of West Hartford, it is my privilege and honor to welcome you to our Veterans Day ceremony. 51 years ago, on Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, President John F. Kennedy spoke these words. We celebrate this Veterans Day for a very few minutes, a very few seconds of silence, and then this country's life goes on. But I think it most appropriate that we recall on this occasion, on every other moment, that when we are faced with great responsibilities, the contribution and the sacrifice which so many men and their families have made in order to permit this country to now occupy its present position of responsibility and freedom, and in order to permit us to gather today. These words spoken by President Kennedy have even greater meaning today when we recognize that the role and the sacrifice that today's women and men fill in our voluntary military forces to achieving our position of responsibility and freedom. This Connecticut Veterans Memorial, like thousands of memorials across this nation, pay tribute to the men and women who have served this nation in times of conflict and in times of peace. We honor the courage and the strength our military has shown throughout our nation's history. At this time, I would like to invite Deacon Jim Hickey, an Air Force veteran, to offer the invocation. Thank you.
They're going to charge you for that, Mo?
Yes, I think so.
Let us pray. Gracious God, on this Veterans Day, we remember and give thanks for those who have given their lives in the service of our country. When the need was greatest, they stepped forward and did their duty to defend the freedoms that we enjoy and to win the same for others. O God, you yourself has taught us that no love is greater than that which gives itself for another. These honored dead gave the most precious gift they had, life itself, for loved ones and neighbors, for comrades and country, and for us. Help us to honor their memory by caring for the family members they have left behind, by ensuring that their wounded comrades are properly cared for, by being watchful caretakers of the freedoms for which they gave their lives, and by demanding that no other young men and women follow them to a soldier's grave unless the reason is worthy and the cause is just. Holy One, help us to remember that freedom is not free. There are times when it costs is indeed dear. Never let us forget those who paid so terrible a price to ensure that freedom would be our legacy. Though their names may fade with the passing of generations, may we never forget what they have done. Help us to be worthy of their sacrifice. O God, help us to be worthy. And as we begin our observance of this Veterans Day, we remember all men and women who are in uniform today. Pray that they will always come home safely and soon. And in a special way, I ask you to pray for and remember Major Brett R. Taylor, who was killed during an insider attack in Kabul, Afghanistan, last Saturday, November 3rd of this year. He was a husband and father of 7 young children. So keep him in your prayers as you pray for all of our deceased veterans.
Thank you, Jim. We are honored today to have the Color Guards of the West Hartford Police Department, commanded by Lieutenant Eric Rousselot, who is also serving as captain of the Color Guards, the West Hartford Fire Department, Color Guard, commanded by firefighter Ryan Shea, and the American Legion Hazel Lodge Post 96 Color Guard, commanded by Legionnaire Michael DeLuca. Captain of the Color Guard, call the units to attention and present arms. Our national anthem will be sung by Florence Lacey.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Flo. Later in our program, Flo will be leading us in the singing of God Bless America. At this time, I would like to take a moment to recognize some of the people who have joined us here today. From the American Legion, Jeffrey Cole, Commander. From the Jewish War Veterans, Ben Cooper. I'd also like to recognize some members of our town council who are with us. Deputy Mayor Beth Kerrigan, Councilman Leon Davidoff, Councilman Ben Winograd, Councilman Chris Williams, Town Manager Matt Hart, and a veteran. From our state legislature, Senator Beth Bai, and Representative Joe Varengia. Thank you for joining us today. Also, appropriate Judge Owen Egan. Excuse me, Judge. Today we are honored to have as our keynote speaker Command Sergeant Major Paul Vicinis. Command Sergeant Major Vicinis was born in Bristol, Connecticut, and raised in Plainville, Connecticut. He received his bachelor's degree in pure mathematics from the University of Connecticut in 1992 and his master's in pure mathematics from Trinity College in 1998. He entered the Connecticut Army National Guard as an infantryman in 1989, completing his basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. His military education has included primary leadership development course, basic and advanced non-commissioned officer courses, and the United States Sergeant Major Academy. He assumed his current role as Command Sergeant Major of the 169th Regiment of the Connecticut National Guard on February 16th of 2017. Prior to his current assignment, he served as Command Sergeant Major of the 102nd Infantry Division from 2014 to February 2017. He deployed to Afghanistan as part of Operation Enduring Freedom as the first sergeant of Apache Company 102nd Infantry Division from November 2009 to November 2010. Among his many awards are the Bronze Star Medal, Meritorious Service Medal, Afghan Campaign Medal with 1 Bronze Service Star, and Global War on Terror Service Medal. Command Sergeant Major Vicinis is the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction for West Hartford Public Schools. Command Sergeant Major Vicinis.
Thank you, Mo. Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Cantor, Senator Bai, Representative Rengia, all of our town officials, our community, and most importantly, the families of veterans and military service members with us here today. I bring you a great thanks for your service. Thank you for your time and attention for being here. Let me begin by saying what an honor it is to speak to you today. I am truly privileged to have been asked to present. It's an honor today to speak about Veterans Day when we think of what an historic day it is. Today is the centennial anniversary of the armistice that brought an end to the fighting in the Great War. And I'm honored to represent all of those service members who answered the call when our very democracy was under attack on a global scale. I am honored to represent those still among us from among our greatest generation who answered the call during World War II when our very borders were attacked from a determined enemy. I'm honored to stand before you today to represent veterans of Vietnam and Korea, our unappreciated and forgotten warriors. And I'm honored to represent our current generation of veterans from the Gulf War, OIF, and OEF. Brothers and sisters whom I did not know in my youth, but that I am forever connected to through the bonds of common experience, trials, and loss. I am honored to represent every man and woman in between and through today and for hundreds of years of yesterdays, dating all the way back to our colonial militia, those that have served during times of war and peace, at home and abroad. It's humbling. It's humbling to speak to you today, especially with the knowledge that the audience around me represents so much of that history, so much of that service, so much of that sacrifice. You represent members and families who share the burdens of separation, the anxieties of the perils of combat, and the wrestling match faced with the inevitability of just carrying on and carrying forward. So to all of you veterans, family, comrades, I say thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. That's a phrase that I hear somewhat often. If I'm out in public and if I'm in uniform, folks will come up to me and say, thank you for your service. Friends, colleagues, even strangers, on days such as today or other patriotic holidays, will make the same proclamation. Thank you for your service. For a time, I struggled with a response. Your welcome just didn't seem appropriate. It felt trite, aloof, even a little arrogant. But moreover, it felt too short and too shallow, as if the transaction were complete. Thank you for your service. You're welcome. I struggle with that as there is something missing. There is a depth of emotion tied to service that's hard to express. A mixture of pride and gratitude, along with more solemn feelings of humility and loss. So what do I say now when they see me and say, thank you for your service? When they see me in uniform, do they really see? Do they see the black band I wear on my right wrist that I've worn every day since May 25th, 2010? When after loading a soldier, and dare I say a friend, onto a medevac helicopter, squeezed his hand and he mine, and I told him he'd be okay, only to learn that he died of his wounds. Staff Sergeant Edwin Rivera was a father, a husband, a leader, and a friend, and so much more. They see me, but they cannot see Edwin. Do they see the emptiness that I carry, that is his memory? The weight of the guilt of not bringing every man home? And so I struggle to respond. We see our veterans, and it's easy to recognize those profiles in courage who have been injured, such as my friend Sergeant First Class Blauvelt, who lost his leg after a Humvee strike against IED strike against his Humvee. He's a visible symbol of the strength and courage of so many of our veterans who came home having sacrificed greatly and who have had to find a way to redefine a sense of normalcy in their lives. But do we see and equally appreciate those with invisible scars who have come home with demons they struggle to contain, who fall prey to addiction, anxiety, and aggression? We see those among our community collecting coats and clothing and foodstuffs for veterans in homes. But do we visit and see with our own eyes those vets in West Haven or Rocky Hill who cannot care for themselves? Those vets who have become homeless, invisible to us, sleeping in the subway or on a park bench, who we skirt past as they beg for money? We may even doubt if they're truthfully representing their service, and then guiltfully wonder if it should even matter. We see the table set for one with a white cloth and an inverted glass. But do we see the dinner table with one less place setting, and the widow putting down the meal in front of the children? And so when they say thank you for your service, I found a reply. It is my privilege and my honor. It has been and continues to be a privilege for me to serve. I enjoy so many privileges in life, and my time as a soldier has granted me greater perspective. So often we walk through life taking for granted the privileges and freedoms that we have without the perspective of what it took to secure these freedoms or what it would be like without them. Soldiers and military families alike have learned perspective. I'd like to share a few simple ones. I've learned and I understand what it means to be wet. I mean wet. My wife yells at me if it's raining out and I don't take an umbrella. And she says, "You're going to get wet." And I kind of laugh. That's not wet. I can remember in basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, a place which if it were a school, we'd call a 90-90-90 school, but for a very different reason. It's 90 plus degrees every day with 90% humidity, and we pack 90 minutes of training into every hour. And it was hot, so hot that our green BDU uniforms were stained white with the salt of our sweat. Right up until we went to the field for a 1-week training exercise where it rained every day for 23 hours out of 24. There was nowhere to take shelter, and you were truly wet. I can remember with great distinction the only hot meal of the day I would get scrambled eggs and a piece of untoasted bread and a downpour that turned it quickly into a mushy soup. And I ate it happily and hungrily and said, "This is wet." But I have perspective because I would never compare that story to a Navy SEAL who underwent BUDS training, or veterans of Vietnam who stayed and marched in the jungle on end for days in downpours and truly suffered and understood. I've learned what it is to be hungry, having to work 12, 14, 16 hours between meals. I had a friend who was a ranger who told me a story that during his ranger training, he had the opportunity to one day to walk through an office building and saw a half-eaten apple core in a garbage can and was so hungry that he picked it up and gobbled it down, core and all. And I looked at him with a knowing smile and said, yeah, I can appreciate that. So I understand hunger differently than my kids who, if I'm 20 minutes late from work, say, I'm starving, Dad. But I have perspective that I would never compare that hunger to what a POW must have endured, having very few to little rations that were probably filled with bacteria or dirt, things that were making them sicker, robbing them of their humanity and their strength. I've learned what it is to be tired. There's a good tired and a bad tired. I like the good tired when you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you prepare yourself for movement to a training exercise, and now it's 2 a.m. and you're just humping in with 100 pounds on your back, and you lay down. By the time you set everything up, you've only got about 2 hours of sleep before you need to get up and do it again. And you do it for a straight week at least. And then there's the bad tired, when you do it for a week and all you've eaten is coffee and maybe a couple of crackers, and you're so tired you begin to hallucinate as you're driving a Humvee and you realize that you're no longer safe. That's tired. But I don't compare it to what the soldier feels on the line when they're guarding the wire and they're worried for their own life and that of their buddy next to them, that the enemy might come crawling up during a few precious moments of sleep that they're able to steal. So I have perspective. Finally, I've learned one other thing. I've learned what it means to trust. I've learned what it means to fight side by side with brothers and sisters, trusting my life in theirs, knowing that they'll act on my behalf to save my life and willingly give theirs to help me or the mission, and I would do the same for them. I've learned that no matter the color of the cloth of the uniform, that there is a common bond that we bring to our service, an understanding that remains unspoken. I've learned that we have the best military in the world because we fight and we serve not just with our bodies, but with our minds and our hearts. And it is that for which I am truly grateful, and for which I say to all of you once more, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Command Sergeant Major Vicinis, for that very wonderful talk. Our next speaker, Mayor Sherry Cantor, needs very little introduction. When I saw her at the annual Veterans Luncheon on Thursday, we spoke very briefly, and she mentioned the long history and pride of military service in her family. A lifelong resident of West Hartford, Mayor Cantor has served on the town council since 2004, and in 2016 assumed the role of mayor. Her leadership has gained West Hartford the title of one of the best places to live in America, according to Money Magazine, and the only town in Connecticut to earn that distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Cantor.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here to take some time out from your day to remember the veterans that have served our country, so we can stand here together and observe and thank in our own and special way. Thank you to Commander Fredette for organizing and bringing us all together. Thank you for Deacon Hickey for your wonderful words and a beautiful rendition. Thank you for Miss Lacey, because I know we will hear more. A beautiful voice. Also, thank you to the Boy Scout troop, the Eagle Scouts, who are here to share and in the ceremony. And also thank you for the Peter Rowe for taps. It takes quite a number of people to pull a ceremony like this together, and it is important. always humbled and awed to be here to speak, especially after Command Sergeant Major Paul Vicinis, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, as you just heard from. My words, I feel, cannot resonate like a veteran that has served alongside so many comrades and taken the leadership role and feel so personally that experience. But we are here today, November 11th on 2018, marking the 100, as you've heard, the centennial, the 100 years to mark the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. That was Armistice Day, a halt to fighting. A year later, November 11th, 1919, was proclaimed the first Armistice Day by President Woodrow Wilson, but it was actually on this 100th day that the fighting actually stopped. This commemoration was dedicated to the cause of world peace in honor of those who served in World War I. Over 30 nations were at war between 1914 and 1918. It was the first modern war with the introduction of air warfare and tanks, while 65 million troops worldwide fought in battles. The U.S. entered the war in 1917. Nearly 5 million men and women served our country during the conflict, with 116,516 U.S. lives lost. There were over 300,000 lives lost internationally. My Jewish grandfather served in World War I. He was shot while serving in France and was sent home. He had escaped religious persecution in Poland at 17 and was drafted shortly after he arrived in New York, barely speaking or reading English. I think about my grandfather Louis and my World War II veteran father, who served in the Army of Occupation in Germany, and my nephew, who is currently serving in the Air Force. He is an A-10 pilot, and friends who have served, or children who have served or are currently serving in our military. I think of the many veterans who are our West Hartford town staff, our town manager, Matt Hart, our assistant superintendent, Mr. Vicinis, and then so many others that are in leadership positions in our town. Many of our leaders are veterans because their dedication to service, to public service, the commitment to a cause greater than themselves. That is true of the 173 veterans, members of both parties, that ran for Congress this past election. With a large number of women and the biggest class of freshman veteran lawmakers since 2010, with almost half of the veterans in Congress in January so they will be individuals who have served in the armed services after 9/11, 2001. A few of us in town had the incredible opportunity to hear a Medal of Honor recipient, Paul Buddy Buca. He actually is a West Hartford resident, and his daughter is a coach in West Hartford. We heard him speak at the recognition ceremony for military inductees. He also was chosen to be the speaker for the teachers' convocation. His inspiring and motivational talk was mostly about leadership. But the message that I had been working on and really took to heart was taking the time to talk to people currently serving or having served, either wearing veterans that you can apparently see that they are veterans. Taking the time to listen, to share your genuine interest in their story and offer your assistance. It is pretty common, as Mr. Vicinis says, for us to say, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. What does that mean? What does that mean? And I always wonder, what is the appropriate answer back? And how do we engage? But really, it is meant respectfully, but it does seem woefully inadequate so many times. So I have been making the conscious effort, as Mr. Buca, as Paul had said, that we need to engage and listen. So I've been asking and making that effort to take that extra effort to listen. So when my husband and I were on our way to the Cape, actually, and we were stopped at a roadside stand, and there was a veteran who was wearing a Vietnam vet hat, and he was selling apples. And my husband actually walked into the men's room, and I was engaging I went up to buy apples. And I started to talk to this veteran, and he was telling me about his experience. He was so, I think, moved that I even asked, where did he serve? How long did he serve for? Where was he from? I ended up buying a lot of apples. My husband was wondering, why do we need so many apples? But I was moved by his story. We engaged, and I just felt compelled to buy a lot of apples. Then at a fair, actually, I had that was sponsored. I stopped by a booth that was sponsored by the local American Legion, and I was talking to a gentleman who also had a hat saying Korean War veteran. He was shocked, actually, really surprised that I took the time to stand there and talk to him for a half an hour. I lost my family at the fair. He was truly, truly grateful. Again, I bought many ceramic mugs. Maybe we needed them, maybe we don't. But every time I pick them up, I think of that Korean War veteran who fought so bravely and valiantly for our country and his service. But recently at a wedding, a dear friend of ours, actually, he grew up in West Hartford and moved to Seattle for work. His son was in a very successful job and left his job to sign up to be a Marine. And everybody wondered why he grew up in a fairly affluent family, why did he step out of this comfortable life to serve? And he said, I need something bigger than myself. We all were so invested in his experience and his livelihood. He was actually deployed to Afghanistan and we were all checking in, obviously, while he was away. And I had the opportunity to see him. He has returned safely, and I had the opportunity to catch up with him recently at his sister's wedding in Arizona. And we were speaking, and I told him how difficult it is for me to come up with the right words that are compelling and that we all can relate to. Being a non-veteran myself, what can I tell our residents to say what we can do on Veterans Day? And he said, I went willingly to serve my country. My parents didn't really necessarily agree. His mother had a very, very hard time with it. But he said, my family didn't adopt necessarily this idea. I knew it was my responsibility. I understood my responsibility and sense of duty. My family and my fellow Marines' families don't necessarily make that choice. Their parents, their spouses, their siblings, and especially their children don't make that choice, but they're all serving as well. So he said, thank the families. That's what you need to do. Make sure that you support and thank the families in addition to the veterans. So today, on November 11th, 2018, marking the 100 years since the halt to the fighting in World War I want to thank all of the veterans for their service and thank them and listen to their stories. As Ben Cooper, our Jewish war veteran here, has done to sit with other veterans to listen to their stories, not only his own story, but sharing all of those powerful stories. But listen to their families and listen to their sacrifice and service of what they had to go through while their loved one was serving. So for those families, thank you for your patience and your sacrifice too. Let's all take more time to listen and to help. And I'm so grateful for all of you, my colleagues, and everybody here that has taken the time to listen and to help. My deep gratitude to you all. God bless West Hartford, the state of Connecticut, and the United States of America.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Captain of the Guards, call the units to attention and post colors. At this time, I would like to ask Command Sergeant Major Vicinis to join the Mayor as our memorial wreath is presented. Joining us today to assist with presentation of the memorial wreath are members of Boy Scout Troop 146, Eagle Scout Alden Wolfson, and Senior Patrol Leader Max Mega. Captain of the Guards, call the units to present arms. Captain of the Guard, call the units to order arms. Thank you, Auden and Max, for joining us today. At this time, I'd like to invite Flo Lacey back to the podium to lead us in the singing of God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
If I may just say a word about Flo, she was last seen on Broadway in the critically acclaimed Kennedy production of Stephen Sondheim's Follies. She made her Broadway debut as Irene Malloy in Hello, Dolly, for which she won the Theatre World Award. Her biggest role was Eva Perón in Evita, a role she played on Broadway, as well as a global tour. Some of her other Broadway credits include Fantine in Les Miserables, Mariana in the Grand Tour, and An Evening with Jerry Herman. Thank you so much, Flo, for joining us today. The Connecticut Veterans Memorial West Hartford is a unique testimonial dedicated to all members of the armed services who served in the United States, beginning with the earliest conflict in our country's history, the King Philip War, up to the present global war on terror. This memorial will forever honor those from West Hartford who made the supreme sacrifice and all who have served our nation. I would now like to ask Deacon Hickey for a closing prayer.
God of peace, we pray for those who have served our nation and have laid down their lives to protect and defend our freedom. We pray for those who have fought, whose spirits and bodies are scarred by war, whose nights are haunted by memories too painful for the light of day. We pray for those who serve us now, especially for those in harm's way. Shield them from danger and bring them home. Turn the hearts and minds of our leaders and our enemies to the work of justice and a harvest of peace. Spare the poor, Lord, spare the poor. May the peace which you left us, the peace you give us, be the peace that sustains, the peace that saves us.
Thank you, Deacon Hickey. Captain of the Guards, call the units to present arms. I would now ask Peter Rowe, a U.S. Army veteran and member of American Legion Hazel Lodge Post 96, to sound taps. Thank you, Peter. On this Veterans Day, let us especially remember and honor the men and women of our military who, when called, are ready to fulfill their mission. Thank you for joining us today. May God bless each of you. May God bless and protect our service men and women in harm's way. May God bless our veterans who've kept our country free, and may God bless America. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.